I never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you don't know me by now, my name is Trini Lovely, and today we're going to have another great, interesting video. We're going to actually talk about the signs today, and I spoke about March yesterday, so today I'm going to actually continue on and speak about Taurus. And the good, interesting thing is, I'm actually a Taurus, so I love so much about my sign. The thing is, I spend such in my early childhood going through depression, and I really didn't understand who I was. Like, I didn't understand why I behaved the way I did, and I was always really hard on myself, really down on myself as far as the people that came into my life. And I remember being very much earlier on in my young adulthood, and people say, you know, why do you tend to put up with so much nonsense from other people? Like, why don't you just cut the person off? And I had to really learn who I was, because I didn't understand why I tend to hold on so long, and I didn't understand why I actually forgive so easily. I didn't understand why I was so loyal, because I would always be so loyal to a friend and come into a friendship and really put my heart into it, and I'll wear my heart on my, literally on my t-shirt, and I'll get my feelings hurt, because most people are always guarded and protecting themselves, and I was just always giving myself to people and sharing myself to people and getting hurt by a lot of friends that came in and out of my life. And I had to actually walk away from a lot of friendship because I was so loyal, so genuine, and so kind and caring to them, that I didn't understand why I continued to give so much of myself. So I hope today that you guys can understand a lot about yourself through the 12 signs, as I go through all the 12 signs, and really see the great characteristics that God blessed you with, and see the good things that you have to offer, right? And really learn a lot about yourself, because one of the things I did, I learned who I was. Like, I learned my sign, I learned my personality trait, and you know what? It actually took me into a place where I actually loved myself off of this. I learned to appreciate myself. I understood who I was. And once I realized like who I was and why I behaved the way that I was behave to people, I understood, and I was able to actually change and tweak things that I felt that needed to be more balanced at the way that I act, as far as like my anger, because I'm that bull, right? I'm that person that will go to 1 to 100 real quick if you piss me off, and I will rage like the bull. So I was able to tweak that, my anger of when I get upset and how I rage with my anger, but I was always able to understand why I love so much. So the archetype of Taurus is actually Venus, right? So if you know anything about Venus, Venus is love, right? And so if the archetype of a Taurus is Venus, do you know how beautiful that is? You are that balance of that love energy. So you should love everything about yourself, just to know that you're capable of being love, and you're capable of giving love. So let's go into the qualities and the traits of the sign. So you're affectionate, you're artistic, you're reliable, you're patient, you're warm, you're loving by nature. Isn't that cool to know that you are loving by nature? So if you ever felt yourself crying and showing people emotions, I remember growing up in a family, and everyone was just based on like fire and air signs. And they'll be like, why are you always constantly crying? Like, why do you let people get to you like that. Like, you need to be more tough. And I would be like, I don't know how to stop being hurt. Like, I don't know how to basically be like you. And they'll say, you're not strong enough, you're weak. So now you understand, if you're Taurus, you're not weak. You're actually ruled by the energy and the archetype of Venus. So you're more loving. And when you learn who you are, as far as you being earth, right, connecting to the element of earth, you get to understand you are a nurturer, right? You're one of the most materialistic signs out there, and you're definitely one of the, out of all the signs, you actually connect to that earth element more than any other sign that actually exists out there, because you're actually earth, right? And all the earth signs connects to earth, but you're definitely connect to earth as that mother, right? So that nurturer, and you are going to have that nurturing personality. So if you ever wonder why, if you were Taurus and you felt yourself being hurt and you felt yourself being that giver instead of that receiver, now you understand why, right? So one thing about a Taurus, let's go into the dark side of a Taurus. You're very materialistic. I am super materialistic. I really don't know why. I just love the things that I love, but throughout years, like meeting friends and people just kind of like looking at me like, why do you have to have that? Well, just embrace it, that embrace who you are. If you like materialistic things, hey, it's you. You can't allow someone to actually change who you are. And as you learn your sign, really start cherishing who you are, really start understanding who you are, really start embracing who you are. And that was one of the ways that I actually was able to come out of depression, actually learning about my sign and learning who I was, and being able to relate to my sign, and being able to balance the energy within myself, and being able to just really see the beauty in the good traits that I have, and really try to balance the negative traits that I have and the weakness of my sign. So let's go back into the dark side of the sign. We don't like change. We're resistant to change. We're stubborn, right? I'm gonna say it. We're a glutton. We're greedy, and sometimes we can be a little bit narrow-minded. So that's the dark side for the sign. So let's go into the colors that associate with the sign: red and orange, right? And when we think about the hyphen, like if you are into tarot cards, you're gonna notice that card that represents the Taurus is a hyphen. And if you know anything about that hyphen, you're gonna realize that hyphen represents the Taurus, but at the same time, that hyphen is someone who's extremely spiritual, who's that teacher, right? And who's that spiritual teacher. So it's going to represent a different side of your personality. So if you're balanced, right, you're going to find yourself being that spiritual teacher, whether if you're religious, whether or not if you are a person who's more spiritual, you're going to find yourself more into that attribute of having that personality where you're going to find yourself connecting. And this is basically if you're balanced, right? So if you're not balanced, you're not going to be that Taurusy, right? And if you're basically carrying, and I want people to understand this, you can always carry an house sign as well with the Taurus, and you can always carry these signs. And actually if you're carrying these signs within you, which you have a Taurus as your house, or maybe Taurus as the moon sign, you're basically going to have Taurus attributes as well. So don't forget that. I don't know if you saw my first Zodiac video where I talked about there's many different houses. There's 12 houses in each sign, right? I talked about the moon sign being, the moon sign with the moon, And I talked about the birth sign is basically that lead-in sign with the personality trait. But you could always be, I'm just giving an example. You could be a Gemini and be have Taurus attributes because of that moon sign, right? Is a Taurus, and you'll find yourself being a Gemini with Taurus attributes. So let's keep in mind that's how it also worked too. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the energy a Taurus can pull. So if you know anything about Taurus, they actually rule that energy of money and finance, right? So a quick example. If you were going to Wall Street and you're from New York and you get off on Bowling Street, you'll see that big bull that sits as if you were going up the hill to Wall Street, and you have to actually get off on Bowling Street and walk up, and you'll see that big statue of a bull. And you have to think about it like if they were feng shuiing, right? That energy comes all the way up the hill, and it comes all the way back down the hill. And what that energy is, it's a bull that represents finance and money. And that's the same thing that you have to think about with the 12 zodiac sign. You're that sign that represents money. So you can tap into that archetype energy, which is Venus, but also tap into that archetype energy, which is money and finance. So if you are a Taurus, remember that. Keep that in mind. You can always tap into this energy if you're balanced and pull the benefit, the positivity of the sign. So a little bit more. Taurus actually love luxury, right? They love everything that's materialistic. They connect to all five senses. When we think about that Taurus, right? Let's go back into that hyphen, that tarot card that represents the Taurus. When with that hyphen that represents the Taurus represents the spiritual teacher, right? So, and when I say the spiritual teacher, it means that it really truly connects back to that material world, right? Pursuing in a state of connecting to that teacher within itself. So just keep that in mind. Not only that you can attract money, not only that you can show love and you can pull love, but you can always tap into that spiritual teaching side as well, because you have that ability when it comes down to the energy of your sign. So I want you guys to also remember that these are qualities that you should very much enjoy. So like I told you before, when I was much younger, I was in a very depressive state, and I really hated myself during this depression time. Like, I hated everything about myself, from my personality to my looks, to everything about myself. And once I learned who I was, and I learned about myself, when I actually learned about my sign, and I really started seeing my sign being the epiphany of myself, I was like, wow, I'm amazing. I'm actually great. And I kind of understood why I behave and act the way that I act. And I was no longer beating up on myself due to the way how I behaved. I actually enjoyed myself much more. So, if you're hanging around a group of friends and you felt yourself being more bougie, right? And you felt yourself being more into liking luxury things and liking your food and liking, just being that genuine, loyal person and being that nurturer, where you find more people tend to tell you their business and open up to you a little bit more. Just remember the sign, right? That Mother Nature sign of yourself, that nurturer sign of yourself, is why people tend to actually come to you and actually find themselves opening up to you. And just also remember, a Taurus is not a sign that it's a loud sign where it has a whole bunch of attraction of friends. Let's remember that Taurus are that sign that is really that loner sign, right? That sign that actually can be by themselves. So let's talk a little bit more about the Taurus as far as what element the Taurus falls into. So the Taurus falls into the earth element, and Taurus is also a feminine earth sign. So the most compatibility of a Taurus is actually the water element. So let's go into the dark side of the Taurus, and the side that is actually more the negative traits that actually could be a weakness towards the Taurus. And that's basically a Taurus is a person who doesn't like change. So the Taurus is not open-minded. I'm sorry, guys. My dog is actually fighting her teddy bears as I speak. So if you hear any noise in the background, it's actually her. And the Taurus is not open to actually any changes. So the Taurus might be a bit closed-minded. And that may be some issues that the Taurus may have as far as being very stubborn and refusing to make those changes in their life. So they get very complacent and very comfortable. So a Taurus may be in a relationship and not even be happy and may be ill-treated and still stay in that relationship because they don't like to change, or maybe in a job that they may not like and not like changes. So the Taurus tends to kind of like hold on a little bit longer than most signs. And that's maybe one of the downfalls that a Taurus may have, is just being very uncomfortable to make changes. So I do want to specify again that someone can be another sign and still carry the Taurus sign because it actually is their moon sign, or they're affected by the Taurus energy through their house sign. So I do want you guys to keep an open-minded when you're learning about all 12 zodiac signs. Okay, so let's actually learn a little bit more about the Taurus sign through the Venus energy, right? So Venus is the only inner planet that rotates in a clockwise direction. And because of the fact that it's rotating in a clockwise direction, it actually connects to this spiritual energy that it's considered in the hidden world above us. So it's an unusual movement that Venus has, which allows the Taurus to connect to that spiritual energy than the other zodiac signs, and as well as Venus having a spiritual energy that connects to the other planets. So keep that in mind when you're learning about the Taurus. There's a connection with a spiritual energy because Venus is the archetype energy to Taurus. So this is why a Taurus have that connection with their as a spiritual teacher. So keep that in mind, right? So because the movement of the spiritual energy is, so a Taurus must learn to be able to trust and learn and actually be merciful to the truth in order to live in this physical world that we live in. So they have to be able to understand that the world is not a bubble, and they don't have to be proactive in making judgment, right? Because they don't want to actually make any kind of real judgment, because they kind of like stuck in this bubble where they don't like change. They want to actually have everything comfortable, and they want to just continue to live life with no changes. But in the world, we live in a world where things is always changing. There's evolution all the time. There's the world continues to keep going. So it's really hard for if you're actually in a place in your life where you not expecting any kind of change. So any kind of change actually put this kind of fear in you where you just don't understand how to grasp the changes that's being made. And this is exactly what a Taurus has to learn. So a Taurus has to learn to be able to adapt to the changes that actually comes into their life. So a Taurus has to make better judgment on the way how they may feel about the changes that actually needs to happen in their life, right? So one of the things that a Taurus has to work on as far as with their negative traits and the weakness of the sign is just that they have to work on the judgment as far as being open to receive and being able to receive a new perspective on life. So they can't be closed-minded. They have to be more open-minded to changes. They have to be more open-minded to hear other people's views. And there's a lot of things that comes into play with why the Taurus is a bit more closed-minded. But if they have the desire to receive and take what others have to share, they will be able to be a sign that actually will be able to balance themselves because of the great attributes they have with this sign, right? So, if you're not open to change and you're not open to receive new ideas, you may lose out on opportunities in life based on how stubborn you are. So these are the things that you have to work on if you are a Taurus, in trying to actually balance yourself a little bit more, because it's by nature that you're going to be able to be stubborn, and by nature you're going to be able to not be open-minded. So you just have to kind of resist that Taurus in you and learn how to tap into those energies and not just say, well, you know what, I'm a Taurus, this is how I am, so I'm going to be stubborn, I'm not going to make any changes, because it actually hurts us in the long run, right? It actually is the weakness to our sign. So we may have all these great attributes as far as connecting to money, to the fact of having this energy of love, having this spirituality connection, but at the same time, we're just very closed-minded, and we're not that open for changes in our life, and we're not that open to actually hear someone's opinion. We have low tolerance when it comes down to somebody else's opinion when we make our decision, because we're stubborn. So I hope you guys enjoyed.